every now and then, Nintendo will give us something truly special. During the Switch's lifetime thus far, we have received several entries in beloved series that have been just that, special. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild gave us a massive, beautiful open world to explore, and Super Mario Odyssey harkened back to 3D Mario's roots. But there are some series that don't always get the amount of attention as Zelda and Mario do. Perhaps the biggest example of such a series? Metroid. Despite it being around for 35 years and it being one of Nintendo's flagship IPs, the mainline Metroid series has only seen 4 entries outside of remakes and the Metroid Prime series, along with its spin-offs. In fact, the last time we got an original 2D Metroid game was Metroid Fusion, 19 years ago. The Metroid fanbase has been waiting and waiting for a new adventure for our favorite galactic bounty hunter. So when Nintendo set out to make a Metroid for the Switch, they knew they needed to deliver. They could have just made a new entry in the series after all these years, and that would have been enough. But they didn't do just that. They made Metroid Dread. The game was planned for release not long after Fusion, and was even teased in Metroid Prime 3, but due to hardware limitations was not able to meet series creator Yoshio Sakamoto's vision for it, and was thus scrapped. The project remained buried for a long time, but after seeing developer Mercury Steam's work with Metroid 2's 3DS remake, Metroid Samus Returns, Nintendo handed Dread over to them. The game was resurrected. Metroid Project Dread would finally be complete. So, the time has finally come for Samus's next mission. What makes Metroid Dread so special? Has it lived up to the hype 19 years in the making? And how does it stack up against the long legacy of its predecessors? Let's suit up as Samus Aran, dive into an uncharted world, and find out. Metroid Dread picks up sometime after Fusion. In that game, Samus supposedly eradicated the deadly X parasites, which posed a major threat to the galaxy. However, a mysterious transmission shows that an X somehow survived. The Galactic Federation traces the transmission back to the remote planet ZDR, and sends a team of 7 near-indestructible research robots called E.M.M.I to track down the X. But soon after, the E.M.M.I go AWOL, leaving the Federation no choice but to send Samus to ZDR to investigate. After all, she was given Metroid DNA to grant her immunity to the X, as Metroids are the parasite's sole predator. Due to Metroids as a species now being extinct, Samus is effectively the last Metroid, and the only one in the galaxy able to stop the X. However, soon after her arrival on ZDR, she is attacked and bested in combat by a mysterious figure, knocking her unconscious and leaving her stranded from her ship in the depths of the planet. In typical Metroid fashion, the encounter causes Samus to lose most of her major abilities, which she must recover throughout the course of the game as she solves the mystery of ZDR and tries to make her way back to her ship. It's a simple enough premise that does a great job of setting the tone for the rest of the game. Metroid games aren't typically story-heavy, but Dread strikes a good balance between giving direction and exposition when needed, and letting the player fill in the blanks through context clues within the environment Samus explores. It's the perfect middle ground between Super Metroid, which set up the story at the very beginning and left the rest to the player, and Fusion, which had a narrative that ran through the entire game and relied heavily on text. I think both of these approaches worked fine in their respective games, by the way, but for a game like Dread, I think the story was handled perfectly like this. Adam from Fusion is back too, but he has a much smaller role in this game. In Fusion, he was the means of delivering much of the exposition, as well as directly telling Samus where to go. We'll of course touch on this in a bit, but Dread ditches the strictly linear progression of Fusion in favor of the more open-ended structure of Super. As such, Adam is only used to give you briefings on uncharted areas and give you a general idea of what to do next. Another great aspect of the story is its accessibility. It's clear that Metroid Dread was created in a way that both newcomers and series veterans can enjoy. We'll see several instances of that throughout this review, but rest assured, Dread can be your first Metroid game. Everything you need to know plot-wise about the previous games is explained to you, and even if you aren't quite familiar with Samus as a character, you'll understand a great deal about her motivations and how she's grown over the course of her previous adventures as you play through Dread. In addition, there are some great moments that are sure to please any longtime Metroid fan, as well as some shocking twists and revelations. Everything in the story serves the purpose of completing the story arc we've been following throughout the Metroid saga and setting the next direction for the series to take. If there's one thing Metroid games and their inspired Metroidvanias are known for, it has to be exploration. These games aren't easy to design, as they intrinsically need to present a world that feels natural to traverse and allows players to progress through it as they gain upgrades that open up new areas. That process should be not only functional, but fun. Both the world design itself and the controls for exploring said world can really make or break a Metroidvania. And it's no surprise, but Metroid Dread does both exceptionally well. Planet ZDR is massive, and it perhaps might be the biggest map to explore in a Metroid game to date. If you weren't a fan of Fusion's largely linear structure, there's almost none of that here. Again, you are never told exactly where to go. The whole world is essentially yours to explore. I felt like I was playing Super Metroid, but on a much more massive scale, which is really saying something because Super is already so huge. The world is designed with the fundamental feedback loop of Metroid games in mind. Something blocks your progress that you don't yet have the tools to overcome, you find an item, and the game shows you, not tells you, how to use it. And then you make your way back to the blockade, now able to progress past it using the item. Beyond that point, the game entrusts you to now use that item in new scenarios and look for hidden passages that you have the power to bypass. A concept that has been a hallmark of Metroid games from the very beginning and is explained to you at the start of the game. I think what makes exploration in Metroid games so special is that these blockades and upgrades aren't just locks and keys. They make you feel stronger as a player, like you accomplished something, and now you have the abilities to overcome that particular obstacle elsewhere in the world. The game didn't open the way forward, you did. Again, it's that same core design philosophy that Nintendo already near perfected in Super, just elevated to new heights and applied in new scenarios. Dread also takes some other pages out of Super's book. For instance, you'll often find yourself locked out of part of the map until you can find a way back using an upgrade you haven't found yet. This is great because since the world is so huge, the game just needs to nudge you every now and then in the right direction, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs to the next big upgrade. It's done in a way that feels natural too, not something like in Fusion where you're arbitrarily locked into a sector until you complete your objective. That approach might have worked in the context of that game and the story it told, but it would not have been appropriate in a game like Dread. And while there is an intended order that a player might obtain the upgrades, a skilled player might be able to find ways to grab an upgrade earlier. The game has only been out for a month, and people have already torn it apart and found tons of sequence breaks, skips, and faster routes. These sequence breaks aren't here by mistake. They're arguably another intrinsic part of Metroid design. I won't spoil anything, but there are some pretty awesome rewards for players who can pull off these tricks. It's so cool that the designers were thinking of the Metroid sequence breaking and speedrunning community by adding these fun little secrets. The icing on the cake, though, are the little touches and details that make exploration in Dread easier and more accessible than ever. That's largely thanks to the game's fantastic map screen, which provides you with a variety of tools to discover the path forward when you get lost. Hovering over an icon for a door or block will tell you what it is and what you need to pass through it. And you can even highlight all instances of the blockade in the area. You can also place markers which will show up on your mini-map to point you in the right direction. In addition, glowing areas on the map give an indication of where hidden items like missile tanks and energy tanks are located. Another great feature are teleportal stations, which provide fast travel between the different areas. All these little things go a long way to improve the experience. It also helps that the environments themselves are fun to explore. You really feel like you're traversing the bowels of a labyrinthine alien world, with all the classic Metroid biomes represented, like caverns, laboratories, molten lava areas, underwater zones, forests, and even a Chozo palace. The structures within the world are constant reminders of the mystery at hand here, as you wonder just what were the Chozo up to on this planet. All in all, Metroid Dread reminds everyone in a world filled with many Metroidvania games, where the genre has its roots, by proving that Nintendo are still the masters of their craft and more than capable of designing another world that is just as fun to explore, if not more fun to explore, than Super Metroid's Zebes. The controls are an integral part of any game, not just a Metroid game. Many otherwise great games have been hindered by having a character that wasn't fun to control. So, how does it feel to play as Samus in Metroid Dread? Pretty darn good. The controls are snappier and slicker than ever, making her an absolute joy to play as. She moves faster than she ever has before, allowing you to run through areas in the blink of an eye. The map may be huge, but if you know where you're going, you can zip from one side of an area to the other inside just a few minutes. Samus can grab ledges like in Fusion, too, and she can also wall jump. Unlike in Super Metroid, wall jumps aren't some secret tech that takes forever to get the timing down for. Instead, they're incredibly easy to pull off. You learn to use them right from the get-go, and they're just another tool at your disposal to move through ZDR with style. On the arm cannon side of things, Samus can now use free aim by holding L while standing still for more accurate shots. This is particularly useful when aiming for a specific target, such as these little red blobs that block your progress, or a boss's weak point. There is a bit of risk-reward involved here, as you'll need to be quick when getting these precise shots in if you're in an unsafe area. You of course can still use the stick to fire in all directions while you're running, but you lose some of that precision. The game takes Fusion's approach to missiles, where all you need to do is hold R when you want to fire a missile instead of your beam. Other classic items make their return, such as the grapple beam, which is also mapped to its own button, ZR. Long gone are the days of toggling through missiles and upgrades to find the one you want, an archaic relic of the SNES controller's limited button options. Even the morph ball can now be instantly entered by pressing ZL, in addition to the old way of ducking twice. Speaking of the morph ball, it actually doesn't appear as soon as you'd expect, it being typically one of the first, if not the first, items you obtain in a Metroid game. That's why it's great that Samus has a slide move that allows her to move through tight passageways that are ground level and just a few blocks long. It comes in handy even after getting the morph ball, as it's fast and even instantly puts you in the morph ball after sliding into a long passageway. Overall, it's just a really satisfying move. There are a handful of brand new additions to Samus's moveset as well, and they're all pretty great. For instance, the spider magnet allows Samus to crawl along magnetic surfaces scattered on the walls and ceilings. One of my favorites, the flash shift, can be used to quickly zip to the left or right up to 3 times in a row. It can be used in midair, and is especially useful to dodge attacks from bosses. This is definitely a game where you'll need to use virtually all the buttons as Samus becomes fully powered up, so it's a bit unfortunate that there aren't any button mapping options within the game. I personally didn't have any problems with the way the buttons were mapped in-game, but it would have been nice to have the option anyway. But overall, movement in Metroid Dread is fast, responsive, and incredibly satisfying. It's used in some very creative ways throughout the game as you scour the planet for hidden items, including some of the most difficult and most rewarding speed booster and shine spark puzzles in the entire series. It goes to show how excellent the controls are in Dread that I returned to Super and found the controls to feel clunky in comparison and a bit difficult to get used to again. They're just that good. With what we've talked about so far, Metroid Dread seems to be a modernized, improved Super Metroid spiritual successor at its core. And that's true to an extent. The game definitely plays it safe in that it takes what worked in previous titles and fine-tunes those concepts, and for the most part, there's nothing wrong with that. But we've yet to talk about the reason the game is called Dread, the E.M.M.I. When I saw the trailer for the game, I thought the E.M.M.I looked really cool, but I was a bit skeptical. I wasn't sure how well stealth would work within the Metroid formula, and I wasn't sure how large of a role they would be able to play in the game before the mechanic would grow stale. And then I played the game. I entered an E.M.M.I zone, heard the tense, atmospheric sounds and music, and took in the unsettling lighting and screen effects. I slowly made my way forward, and then I heard that creepy electronic chirping. It was getting closer, and I knew I was in danger. And then, it finally spotted me, and I ran, for my life. It was then, as I experienced the adrenaline rush from narrowly escaping an E.M.M.I zone after it pursued me, that I realized the E.M.M.I are freaking awesome. The game makes it abundantly clear that you are virtually helpless against an E.M.M.I. Not even your missiles can make a dent in their armor plating. At first, you just try to stay as far away from them as possible. And if you're spotted, all you can do is run. You're locked into the zone until you can escape out of the E.M.M.I's line of sight. And if it catches you, well, you're toast. That is, unless you're able to take advantage of two very small windows to counter the killing blow. Doing so will stun the E.M.M.I and allow you to slide past it, hopefully buying you a few extra seconds. This is really a last-ditch effort, and due to its randomness, it's quite difficult to learn the timing for, and usually only happens if you're lucky. You're constantly dipping in and out of these E.M.M.I zones, playing a game of cat and mouse with this mechanical menace until you're finally able to reach the E.M.M.I's central unit, a mother brain-esque creature machine thing. Dismantling the central unit will power up Samus's arm cannon into the Omega cannon, which you use to melt the armor plating on the E.M.M.I's face and then deliver one powerful charge shot to destroy it for good. Defeating the E.M.M.I is essential to progressing through the game, as Samus gains abilities from them upon destroying them. The game also gives you a handful of tools to help evade the E.M.M.I a bit easier. The Phantom Cloak is one such tool, as it makes Samus invisible, meaning she can't be spotted by an E.M.M.I. She also doesn't make sound in this form, which is very useful as the E.M.M.I know where to find you by detecting sound. There are a few caveats to this, as your mobility is greatly hindered in this form, and staying invisible for too long causes you to lose energy. You'll also still be captured if you touch an E.M.M.I. It's a very interesting balance, and it proves that stealth works surprisingly well in Metroid. It also pairs well with other abilities, like when using the spider magnet to cling tightly to the walls and ceilings in the hopes that the E.M.M.I won't crawl up and get you. It's such a relief when you're using the Phantom Cloak and the E.M.M.I is right there, and then it just decides to turn around. It's so awesome. In short, the E.M.M.I turned out to be a standout part of the game, and although I died a lot against them, I never got bored or too frustrated. That's largely thanks to the addition of checkpoints whenever you arrive at an E.M.M.I zone door, allowing you to jump right back in without having to trudge back from the last save room. I loved how the E.M.M.I evolved with each one you encountered, as they gained the ability to crawl on walls and ceilings, crawl through tight spaces, and charge at you at high speed. And I loved how Samus's upgrades mirrored that evolution as you gained those powers after defeating them. The thrill of being chased by these incredibly fast and precise machines is unparalleled. It was like the SAX from Fusion with the intensity turned up to 11. Even their design is just plain awesome. I love the way its limbs can just shift around its body, and how it looks like a cross between Wheatley from Portal and the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. The E.M.M.I zones are the perfect way to capture, well, dread. You know what's coming as soon as you enter those doors, and you know that whatever happens, you're going to have to face it. It's not just fear, it's dread. I may have been skeptical at first, but by the end of the game, I was so impressed that I honestly wish we could have seen a bit more of the E.M.M.I than what we got. In addition to exploring the world and sneaking past the E.M.M.I, there's a whole cast of baddies to cause trouble for our favorite bounty hunter. But this time you're not limited to just your basic weapons in combat. You have access to melee counters, which can be used on certain enemies by pressing X the moment a flash visual cue appears. Doing so will counter an enemy's attack and stun it, as we saw previously with the E.M.M.I. From there you can easily dispatch the enemy with an attack. Defeating enemies this way causes them to drop way more energy and missiles than usual, so there's definitely incentive to do this. Samus can also use a dash melee, which allows her to plow through enemies while running. Both of these additions are great, and they add variety to the options you have as you decide the best way to take down enemies depending on your situation. Metroid games are also known for their intense and difficult boss fights, and Dread is absolutely not an exception. Regular enemies pack a punch, but these guys are on a whole other level. They will keep you on your toes as you learn their patterns and weaknesses. Be prepared to die a lot throughout this process, but just like the E.M.M.I, checkpoints are placed right before bosses, eliminating the annoyance that was sometimes present in previous titles. These bosses are a true test of your skills and will push what you've learned to the limit. But with a little perseverance and patience, they are satisfying hurdles to overcome. The bosses are a lot more cinematic now, too, and there are some great sequences where successfully countering the boss will allow you to just spam missiles at it in a sort of interactive cutscene. There are also cutscenes which show how to damage the boss and progress the fight if you pay close attention. For instance, anyone who's played Super Metroid knows that to defeat Kraid you need to shoot missiles into his mouth. But in case you didn't know that, the game teaches you. And also, can I just mention how awesome Samus is in these cutscenes? I mean, Samus has always been kick butt, but they really nailed her stone-cold bounty hunter personality here. Samus barely speaks at all in this game, so this is the perfect way to do a silent protagonist. Overall, the bosses in Dread are pretty cool. Most of their designs aren't anything too crazy, but the fights themselves make up for that. Another minor complaint I have is that the second half of the game reuses a couple of mini-bosses several times. The fights are fine, but they did start to wear on me after a while. There's no doubt though that combat in Metroid Dread is fun no matter what foe you're facing. The melee attacks provide a fresh take on a classic system, and mastering the skill curve is incredibly rewarding, especially on a second playthrough, now knowing how to defeat all the bosses. I'm not one to care too much about frame rate and graphics. As long as the game runs well and looks solid on its hardware, I won't complain. I'm happy to report that Metroid Dread typically runs at a smooth 60 FPS, and I experienced very few issues with stuttering. The game has a 1600 by 900 resolution while docked, and is 720p in handheld mode. So overall, Metroid Dread runs how you'd expect being a Switch game. It looks absolutely fine, but isn't necessarily pushing the hardware to the limit. The visual effects are fantastic as well. Lighting is used effectively, fog is used to add detail to a lot of the backgrounds, and that film grain effect adds so much atmosphere to the E.M.M.I zones. The animations are clean and crisp, and the cutscenes during gameplay are all rendered in real time. Overall, I'm a fan of Dread's art style. It looks realistic, but isn't gritty or anything. It's sort of what we usually see with Nintendo games. There's this almost plasticky look to everything that reminds you that it's not real. And while I might not be the biggest fan of that particular aspect, the incredibly detailed work that went into all the backgrounds and set pieces more than makes up for it. The game's visuals pay homage to the games before it while also exploring new territories. It's almost exactly how I'd expect a remake of Super or Fusion to look, and the assets in Dread could definitely be reused if Mercury Steam's remake of Fusion ever comes to pass. On top of the visuals, Dread features some amazing sound design. The E.M.M.I zones are a great example of this, as we've mentioned. The music is one area I've heard some criticism on, and I have to say, while it may not be as memorable as other Metroid soundtracks, I certainly don't think the music is awful or anything. It fits in the situations it's used in, and there's a lot of great atmospheric tracks. Something that does hinder the music a bit is that it tends to get buried underneath the sound effects sometimes, which may be the reason why it isn't as memorable as it could be. All in all, Metroid Dread's presentation is top-notch. The strengths far outweigh the weaknesses. It's yet another shining example of that Nintendo polish that makes an already good game truly great. I'm sure you don't even need me to tell you this, but if it wasn't already abundantly clear, Metroid Dread is nothing short of a spectacular game. I mean, what else is there to say? Is it flawless? Of course not. What game is? Is it a masterpiece? Only time will tell if it reaches Super Metroid's status of perennial glory. But do you know what Metroid Dread is? It is the Metroid game we've been waiting 19 long years for. It is Metroid 5, the true follow-up to Metroid Fusion. It is the project long buried by its creator and finally brought back to life. It is the renaissance of a series that has been through hardship, financial struggle, and neglect. And that last point is crucial. Metroid Dread has been selling like crazy. It's the highest selling Metroid game at launch, and it's on track to be the best selling game in this series. The game's success will hopefully send a message to Nintendo that yes, Metroid is a viable series again. We want more Metroid games. And do you know what else those sales numbers imply? It's not just the longtime fans buying Dread, it's newcomers too. Nintendo has marketed the heck out of this game, and it really shows. People are excited about it, and they're talking about it all over the internet. It's just more proof of the quality of this game. It's the sort of thing that only happens once in a while with Nintendo games, and the fact that it's Metroid this time around is something really special. I know giving the game a score is probably really arbitrary at this point, but I will anyway. On a 10-point scale, with a 5 being average and a 10 being perfect, Metroid Dread scores a phenomenal 9.7 out of 10. Yeah, I freaking love this game, and I know you just might too. If you're new to Metroid or even Metroidvanias in general, or you've been looking to pick the game up, please give it a shot. It's cemented itself as my favorite game of the year, and has secured a spot in the top tier of the Switch's ever-growing library. Samus Aran is back, and better than ever. This has been Super Stash, and thank you for tuning in to my review of Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread scores a phenomenal Metroid Dread scores a phenomenal... What can I say? Phenomenal. Phenomenal! That's how you say that word. Okay. It's the last paragraph. Come on. Pull it together.